columnist, contributor here at the Big 550, KTRS, STLtoday.com. Good morning, Tony Messenger.
Morning, McGraw. How are you?
We're doing good.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Kelly.
Kelly.
Hi.
Kelly is here. I got to give you a shout out. It pains me to do this, but in reading one of your columns about Eric Greitens, I had forgotten that Ed Martin was in his own email scandal when he was chief of staff under Matt Blunt when he was in the governor's office.
Yes, he was. He was the ringleader of the email scandal, which is just really it says a lot about 2017. The guy who lost his job in the Missouri governor's as Missouri governor's chief of staff because of his incompetence as it relates to destroying emails and advising a young deputy attorney to destroy emails, and that he was going to ignore his advice relating to the Sunshine Law. This guy's now on CNN talking about Hillary's emails and Donald Trump's emails and text messages from FBI agents. It's kind of funny, except for it's also really absurd.
I also find it interesting that people are looking at this FBI agent's text messages claiming that he's got bias towards President Trump, and we know this because his text messages, by the way, he had a lot of critical things to say about Clinton too, but we know this because his text messages weren't destroyed in some type of newfangled app, whereas Eric Greitens' text messages are being destroyed, so we have no idea what he's saying.
Yeah, and this is a big deal. The Kansas City Star broke the story a couple of weeks ago that the governor and some of his top staff members are using an app on their phones called Confide, and it's sort of like Snapchat. Basically, you and I send a text message to each other, and then it disappears, and nobody can ever see it. Well, that's fine if you and I are just talking about our fantasy football team, but we're talking about the governor of the state. And somebody has to be able to make a determination at some point whether or not those are official records of the state. And the Attorney General says text messages very much can be the official record of the state, even on personal phones, because we all know people talk about state business on their personal phones and their personal and campaign finance emails these days. And so this is wrong. It's already been dealt with at the presidential level. Some members of President Donald Trump's staff were using Confide, and a lawyer for the White House said, no, you can't do that. It violates federal law as it relates to presidential preservation of records. This is the same sort of thing on the state level. And here's what people have to understand. If you thought Hillary's emails were a big deal, then Eric Greitens' texts are a big deal. If you think the FBI agent's texts are a big deal, then government email and text of all government officials, regardless of party, are a big deal. And one of the two columns I wrote on this recently pointed to the fact that the Sunshine Law is broken. It was broken when Ed Martin was violating it almost a decade ago when he was in the governor's office, and it's broken now when Governor Greitens is thumbing his nose at the concept of having to save his text messages. This is a big deal, and state lawmakers are going to have to deal with it. They're going to have to fix the law, and Attorney General Josh Hawley is going to have to get over partisan politics and investigate what's going on with this Confide app.
But, okay, so with all that being said, Eric Greitens hasn't denied it, hasn't agreed to this, hasn't admitted to it. So, I mean, you have an allegation that the governor's office is breaking laws because they are trading information they are destroying documents, if you will. And so he refuses to acknowledge this. You have a report out there. What's the next step? Is Josh Hawley going to call for some type of investigation?
The next step, the appropriate step, would be for Josh Hawley to do what Jay Nixon did when he was the Attorney General, and that is to hire special investigators to start looking into it. That's what happened when there were clear allegations in the press. I was the one who broke the story about the governor's office destroying emails. There were special investigators appointed, 2 retired state patrolmen, and then the judge involved in the case also appointed 2 special attorneys generals, one Republican, one Democrat, to oversee the case. Something like that is very bipartisan, that looks into the use of that app to determine whether or not records are being destroyed and laws are being violated, is the appropriate thing to do. Either that or the governor comes out and says, you know what, I was using it, I realize it's wrong, we're not going to do it anymore. I don't personally see Governor Greitens doing that, but that would be the easiest way for it to go away.
Yeah, there's 2 arguments here, or 2 conversations. I think everyone agrees that we need to update the law to reflect 21st century technology, and a private text message between Eric Greitens and his wife over who's bringing home dinner should remain private. But when you're talking about some type of legislation that he's texting his chief of staff, that should be preserved. I don't know how you write a law to explain that or not or whatever, but that needs to be taken care of. But the secondary issue is, until that law is changed, do we have a governor who is destroying documents and not acknowledging it?
We might. I mean, the evidence shows that he has the ability to do it. Whether or not he's doing it, we don't know, and that's a problem. And clearly, this is a governor who, despite his promises of transparency during the campaign, isn't a big fan of transparency when it comes to campaign finance, when it comes to the decisions that he's making. So this is a big deal, and I continue. I've been writing about this for literally a decade, this concept. I don't care what party the governor is, the president is, state lawmakers are. This is a problem with the culture of our politics. Our politicians believe that their documents, that their communication should be secret, but that when the guy in the other party or the woman in the other party is doing it, it's evil, it's awful, they should go to jail, lock her up. This is a problem with the culture in our politics. We are either a conservative state that believes that there should be public accountability. That's where Sunshine Law comes from. And we write a law that applies to Democrats and Republicans and text messages and emails and preserves documents and is fair and reasonable, or we don't believe it and it's just, wild, wild west for everybody, and we should just stop talking about it if it's Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Eric Greitens, whomever. I think we care. I think we want there to be public accountability. And the challenge is for lawmakers to get beyond the partisanship of it and write a reasonable law that protects the public's ability to know how decisions are being made in our government.
We should say that Josh Hawley, Republican, who is going to be running against Claire McCaskill, has come out and said that the use of that app is illegal, correct?
What I have heard him say is that he believes text messages, even on personal phones, that might involve state business should be preserved. So one can interpret that he might find the use of confide to be illegal. I'm not sure that he has explicitly said that.
Right.
And he has said, despite initially saying he couldn't investigate the governor's office, that he's at least thinking about possibly, appointing a special investigator. So it's his mind is open to doing the right thing.
Well, and he's going to be running for United States Senate, so he's going to have to answer this question. This is a sticky wicket he's going to have to deal with as he starts on the campaign trail.
Yes, he is. And keep in mind, when he was running for Attorney General, a former state lawmaker named Kevin Elmer from Nixa filed a Sunshine Law request for Josh Hawley's emails, and Hawley argued in court that they weren't public records. So, again, this is one of these things where there is a problem as it relates to Sunshine Law and politicians, and they're believing that they are all above the law. And the guy who sued Josh Hawley, by the way, was a Republican. This isn't, not everything when it relates to public accountability is about partisanship. And so the Attorney General's got a problem here as well, and he's going to have to figure out where he stands on public accountability. He's either for it or he's against it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist with us Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tony, have a good day. Thanks.